Welcome to the Divorce Angel podcast, and thank you for joining us. Get ready to uncover the strategies everyone can implement for successful separation and divorce. This will save you valuable time, money, and emotions while learning the secrets to your happy ever after. And now your host, my wife, Tanya Summerton.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Divorce Angel podcast. I'm actually sitting here drinking my blood red kombucha as a celebration. I wanted to bring this podcast to you today after just having a meeting with one of my clients. For all of those people out there that think that things just aren't going to get any better and everything is by far the worst that life could throw at you, I've just been with one of my clients, and I remember her sitting on the couch in my office crying, saying, how did life get this bad, and what did she do to deserve how her life had turned out? So to give you some context to this whole story, let me paint you a picture. This couple had been married for 23 years. They had two teenage children, one 15 and one 17. He'd ran his own business for many years, and she was a school teacher. Now, he, even though he ran his own business, was not a very good businessman. Previously, he'd been bankrupt, and then he started a new business. The couple owned a house, and because he was a builder, he thought that he could add value to the property by demolishing a lot of the internal walls and bathrooms to repair and add value. But over the last 8 years, what had happened is the house was just a shell. He demolished things but never went back and repaired anything. So they were living 24/7 in a construction site. The two children, boy and girl, were in the same bedroom and had been for the past 8 years because of the renovations. And yet he continued just to go, yep, I'll get around to it, or I'm gonna. And it never got done. She continued to go to work, be promoted, and do really well in her career. And she loved teaching children. And then one day she came home early from work to see a whole lot of letters in the letterbox. On getting the mail and then opening it, she realised that there was all of these default letters, last chance letters, and even a summons for court, or a reminder of a summons for court. As you could imagine, you've just been going to work thinking that your money is paying to go towards improving the family's life, repairing the house, helping your husband build his business, and all of these things, to find out that it was all a lie, that he hadn't been paying bills. Wherever he was going every day probably wasn't to work because there was no money coming in, and the more bills she went, or the more letters she went through, she realised that the debt had just mounted up and up. He'd even made her sign a document for a $30,000 business loan against the house. Now, she told me she knew at the time that she shouldn't sign it, but what do you do when you've been in a relationship for so long and your husband begs you to sign something and says, if you don't sign it, then I'm not going to be able to build what I said I was going to build. It's only a short-term loan. We'll be right and I'll pay it back. So she trusted him. It also turned out that he'd forged her signature on another one and a few other sort of associated things like that had occurred. So we've all heard the term sexually transmitted debt, and that's what had happened in this client's circumstances. So she found herself in an absolute world of hurt, and it come from coming home early one day thinking that she was going to have a restful night, glass of wine, watch TV, cook dinner, to all-out chaos occurring. And on confronting her husband about all of these letters, he just denied, and said, no, these aren't correct. They've made a mistake. So that's when she finally started working with me. Her financial advisor gave her my number and we started working together. before she left the relationship, it was really important to make sure she had as much paperwork and had done as much due diligence as possible to fully understand the debt position she was in. So she went about collating all that information, making phone calls, ringing people that were on the letters, finding out as best she could a clear financial picture. And unfortunately for her, it was so devastating that she sat on the couch in my office crying her eyes out. And she had every reason to feel like that. I remember when she left, I myself got really teary, wondering how someone who was the salt of the earth, that went to school and tried to bring up our children, and she paid back to society, she did as much as she could for the school environment, she loved her children. How could she find herself in this position? And why was her husband just not willing to confront the financial situation that they were in? We got the house valued to find out exactly what the property was worth. Now, as I said before, he'd gone through and decided to renovate the property, so it demolished a lot of internal walls. When I had the property valued, the actual value of the property come back at pretty much what the mortgage was worth for the couple, because it was really only land value. The house needed so much work, it was really only land value. So sitting down with the team and the financial advisor and the lawyer and a debt consolidator, there was no choice but for this beautiful client to go bankrupt. So could you imagine, put yourself in her position. Here she is going to work every day, working really hard, thinking that their life was getting better, to in one moment her whole life turning around. Now at the stage I said to her, this is happening for a reason. Right now is happening for a reason. It's really hard for you to see what that is, and it's probably hard for you to understand, but I promise you that things will get better. But she just could not see the light. She was heartbroken, and rightly so. So she left her husband and we got her into a rental property. And the reason that we had to do that is because if they both went bankrupt, or he went bankrupt, which looked like that was what was eventually going to happen because of the amount of debt that he was in, that she wouldn't be able to get a rental property. That question is asked. So we needed to get her out of the family home and get her and the kids set up as quickly as we possibly could so that she could start to try and rebuild her house and then worry about everything else after we did that. We had her moved out. We got her into a townhouse, her and the kids, and got her settled. And then we had to sit there and go through the rest of the mess that she found herself in. There was no choice after the team had looked at everything that she had to go bankrupt. And you might ask, why should she go bankrupt when he was the one that was carrying the debt? It was his business. Well, if you think about it, the mortgage was 50-50. So the mortgage was in both their names. She'd already signed this $30,000 business loan to allow him to put that against the house. So there was an additional $30,000. It also turned out that the lease on his car, she'd signed for that some 3 years earlier and didn't realise that she'd actually done that until one day she got a phone call from Toyota saying that, look, you haven't paid any car repayments back for X amount of time. So that added to it. There was all of these other debts like amenities and those sorts of things. And because the husband had always paid the bills, so her wage just went straight into the joint account, the mortgage came out, and with the rest of it, other bills got paid. So money was always tight, but she just thought it was because he was building his business. The consensus from the team was that she had to go bankrupt. So she went bankrupt. Personal liquidator was given her file. That's their job to let her know that she's gone bankrupt. And because they'd separated, the ex-husband then got a letter to say that his wife had personally now filed for bankruptcy. And he still to that day was still denying that they were in financial problems. He still to that day said, no, everything's going to be okay. I can sort this out. He just continued to live in denial. So I've just come back today from having a 2-hour coffee with this client. And I have to tell you, I've had one of the best weeks in business this week. I've had a joint venture proposed with a multinational company, which is great. I've had a media interview done. I'm going to be on the radio in a few weeks. So a whole lot of really, really good stuff has happened to me this week. But I have to tell you, hands down, my meeting with this client just now has topped it for me. Absolutely topped it. So sitting there having a coffee, and I was asking her, how's everything going? How's your new life? She started a new job at a new school because she had to break away from all of the community and everything, and she didn't want people talking about what was going on. They had to move their children from very expensive schools to much cheaper schools. So their whole life has been turned around. So she went on to tell me about her new job, and she told me about, even though she's now gone bankrupt, that she's really, she can understand why it happened. She also, now that she's away from her ex-husband, she can see all these things that she couldn't see when she was living there. And she's starting to understand why it all happened. Like, it had to happen at some stage. But she also said that can see all of the faults that he had that she couldn't see before. And then she went on to tell me 2 months ago, when she was out with some friends, she got introduced to another person. And she said, so we've been dating. And I really, really like him. He's a really nice guy. She said, he makes me feel protected and secured. He understands what I'm going through. When I tell him about how I can't believe how my life has turned out, he just hugs me and says it's going to be okay. The day she sat on my couch crying, I remember her saying, no one will ever love me. I'm a 49-year-old woman, and I find myself at this age going bankrupt, moving out of my family home, leaving my husband. What the hell has happened? And then today, watching her talk, listening to the love that she has for her life is simply amazing. And it makes my heart sing. And I'm so proud of her. And I said to her, remember when I told you that this would all happen for a reason? It is all stepping stones to something bigger and better. And she said, I should have trusted you. So for all of you out there that are going through something like this right now and think that there is no hope, that life is just awful, and how did you find yourself in this position? Like I say to all of my clients, you just do not know what tomorrow will bring. You have to get up every morning and think positive. There's a lesson in everything that we go through, and you just have to look for the lesson. And if you can be grateful for that lesson, you can turn your life around. Now, she says to me today, she let it all go too long. She should have left earlier. She probably sensed that some things weren't right, but ignored them and thought that she was just doing what society accepted of her. But then I said to her in return, what is it that this journey that you've been on was meant to end right where it is right now? And you were meant to stay with your ex-husband for that amount of time. You were meant to go through what you went through because there's a bigger picture here for you. And that's what I want you to think about, exactly that same thing. Life wasn't meant to be easy, and we go in ups and downs, and for every up, at some stage we will have a down. And right now you might just be going through that. But tomorrow, who's to say that things just don't get so much better that your life is exactly what you dreamt of? And like my client, she can now see that things were meant to happen. And that's what I'm trying to say to you. Right now, everything that you're dealing with might be meant to happen. So just trust in what's going on. Trust in the journey. Trust that you're learning a lesson, and know that everything will be okay. You must believe that everything will be okay, and it will. So being bitter and twisted gets you nowhere. You need to think about what it is that you can do in your life to turn your life around. And for every action, there's a reaction. So if you're just sitting there feeling sorry for yourself or wondering how you got to this position, like this client, think that it was meant to be. It was meant to happen. And she put one step after the other. She took an action, and for every action, she got a reaction, and then she's found herself in this position. It was the hardest thing she ever did, going bankrupt. But by going bankrupt, it's got her to where she is today. She's no longer living in a lie. She now has control of the money that she does have. And she's so grateful to have worked with me. And for that, I am truly blessed to be able to change someone's life like that. Thank you for listening. And I just want you to go away and think about all of the good things that have happened to you. It might be really bad right now, but tomorrow will be better. You just have to think it. If it's not tomorrow, it will be the day after or the day after, but it will get better, I promise you. All right, well, thanks for listening, and I hope that you've got something out of this podcast. Bye for now.